Rising worries about a global recession led to fears of a longer-term demand disruption. Not just a global recession, this is the greatest recession in human history. This pandemic has changed the course of history. This is not just economic collapse. This is the collapse of civilization. The entire world is shutting down, and people are freaking out as we have never been before. The impact on humanity will be of biblical proportions. What's going on, we've never seen before in our lifetime. Experts are warning that hundreds of millions of people around the globe could eventually die. It is mind-boggling to think of the lost businesses, lost jobs, lost retirements, lost security and plans, lost confidence in governments. What would an after-pandemic economy look like, and who can calculate the economic destruction? Our society is not equipped to handle a crisis of this magnitude. This has triggered the global economic reset we've been waiting for. Organic job creation is not solid. When nearly 1 million Americans are claiming jobless claims each week, that is not a good sign. Even that number is understated. Market shrugs off everything. It entirely ignores the overwhelming amount of negative, poor economic data, while running wild with about 5% of the total data that is slightly positive. Investors have never been more irrational. I mean, the Fed's plunge protection team, BlackRock, has never acted so irrational. The US government is pumping the stock prices artificially via infinite margin trading desks. Dow Jones was trading at 15,000 in 2015 with much better corporate earnings and fundamentals. The bleeding hasn't started yet. The sad reality is when markets fall, they sometimes do not come back. Bogus GDP number does not reflect the reality. There is no job creation, unemployment claims are skyrocketing. The future is bearish. People do not want to return to jobs because the US government is printing trillions of dollars per month and giving away. Furthermore, free capital gains in the US stock bubble deters job returns. It's the corrupt Fed funny money. $120 billion per month of it. With or without a tax hike, the fake money keeps getting poured in. The money supply is up over 500%. What does it take for Americans to realize they are being burned? The Fed has created the biggest asset bubble in US history through interest rate manipulation and printing trillions of dollars. Gold and silver are money. We used to be on a gold standard. This limited the power of the Fed to destroy purchasing power and print at will. The pandemic is being used as an excuse to print over the current economic collapse underway. The brainwashing is the worst I have ever seen. There is nothing okay with the market, the damage is done. Raising taxes on everything wouldn't pay it back, it's planned, and people need a mental alarm clock to see. I am of the opinion that they are instigating a managed, controlled, and deliberate collapse. But there will be nothing managed and controlled about this. The only thing that will save us is ourselves. Carrying out our resistance when the noose continues to tighten and the government's credibility continues its plunge. FEMA condo coming to your area sooner than you think. Beware of the friendly faces that come offering reasonable, global solutions to the recession, depression, epidemic, panic, or whatever the disaster panic du jour might be. The global economy has just entered a recession, and the fundamental damage of the virus outbreak on an already over-leveraged economy will be greater than anything we have ever seen. The question is no longer whether there will be a crisis, but how deep and lasting it will be. So welcome to the global recession. If you imagine a graph of tax revenues versus tax rates, at one end is 0 and the other is 100%. At 100% nobody works and no tax revenue is raised. Somewhere on the graph, raising taxes no longer produces more tax revenue. This is the Laffer curve, and where are we now on that curve? Will the rich quit working or find ways to sidestep the taxes? Do enough make $1 million a year? The camel's nose is in the tent and taxes will be raised for all of us eventually. Don't be lulled by thinking it's just your neighbor who will end up paying more taxes. And we forget the increase in real estate taxes year after year. Fed pumping stocks into the close again. Biggest asset bubble in US history. 28 trillion in debt. Currency destruction, end of empire. By whatever metrics you follow, the thrill of heady markets is gone. Be rational in your choices. The earlier exit, the bigger profit. We're entering another cycle today. S&P 500 was trading at 1500 in 2015 with much better fundamentals and higher corporate earnings. Thrilling numbers, unimaginable only a few weeks ago, almost ignored by the price lists, such as the numbers of defaults expected for corporate America that will exceed 10% for S&P. A figure which European companies will also approach. All the fault of the sudden freeze of economic activities caused by the pandemic containment measures that will put credit profiles at a global level under intense pressure, explain the experts of S&P. Confident that the collapse of cash flow, associated with much tighter financial conditions and the simultaneous oil shock, will damage the creditworthiness of companies globally. The magnitude of this impact will vary significantly depending on the industry and asset class concerned. In any case, a serious contraction, although of short duration, will impact above all on the weaker debtors or on those in the sectors most directly exposed. However, it cannot be ruled out that a prolonged recession may have wider implications. This is clearly an organized world event with some hidden NGOs calling the shots, as every sovereign nation around the world is given the exact same script with the exact same talking points down to the same media-generated hysteria using the same planted propaganda of toilet paper shortages to cause a run on toilet paper and hoarding. This has all the hallmarks of a Hollywood production. It serves multiple agendas as we see the globalists trying to power grab and fund all their projects under emergency measures acts around the world. This is the globalists' takeover. In 2008, the scapegoat for an economic collapse was blamed on stupidity and subprime loans. I believed, as many did, that the 2008 financial collapse was just a practice run for this current main event. And of course, this main event needed a scapegoat. So they produced one. And boy, did they produce one. Today, this main event, in which we are only in round 1 of a 12-round match, is being blamed on the pandemic, in order to make the most of the current situation with the motive as to completely take down all of the economies of this world. And it will, in my opinion, become the greatest economic and financial collapse in the history of mankind. And they can't just let everything crash though, in my opinion, they have to have a controlled crash, as is currently being done with the stock markets. Why would they do such a thing? In order to get one step closer to a new world economic order. It seems that everything these highly secretive planners do, they need to practice their plans first. And just as the 2008 financial collapse was a practice run for this current main event, cryptocurrencies was set up as a practice run for their long-desired one-world currency, which will also eventually become fully digital, in order to see how the public would accept digital currency, and how we would use it. Below is the sequence of events that I believe must take place in order to form this New World Order endgame, and just a note, this New World Order is not just a conspiracy theory, nor is this one-world currency. A one-world currency, which will end up being the end result of this current collapsing of the world economies. Out of the ashes of the world, fiat currencies will rise the new, one-world currency. Yes, the US dollar will collapse also. Probably by them first collapsing the stock markets, so everyone is forced to jump into US treasuries instead. Then, the US government goes bankrupt, and US treasuries collapse also, and so does the US dollar. This one-world currency will eventually become fully digital and fully traceable once the technology catches up. In this way, they will not only know what we spend our money on, but also where we were at the time we spent it, and at what time. Big Brother will be watching all the time. And eventually, when the technology is fully established, they will force us all to receive an RFID chip implant in our hand in order for us to buy and sell. No more credit cards, no more debit cards. And it may even be fitted with a GPS so they can track where we are at all times, if possible. And if they have a problem with us, they will simply turn the chip off, and we will not be able to buy or sell anymore. Total control. One world central bank, like the Federal Reserve, wasn't bad enough. One world financial system. One world economy. One world religion, perhaps. One world court. One world police force. One world army. One world government, in other words, everything we have in the US government, except it will be in control of the whole world instead of just in control of the US. And we will be its servants. And eventually, when their time is ripe for the harvest, they will introduce their one world dictator. Then, when it is all over, when everything has been accomplished, the money will then be destroyed and will be no more, and we will all be free and equal. In the end, instead of serving money, thus serving ourselves, we will be using our talents to serve mankind, and a new world will be born. Big Pharma is part and parcel of the manufactured panic and lies. Just look at who is benefiting from this hysteria. Meanwhile, in one fell swoop, we have all lost our rights and freedoms, with barely a whimper from the masses. Your right to free movement will be restricted permanently. Your right to free association will be restricted permanently. Your right to bodily autonomy will be history. The rights of the individual will soon no longer exist. Many more horrors await. Fear and ignorance will guarantee compliance. Not much time before all the avenues of resistance are closed forever. The psyche of the population has been irrevocably altered, to its own detriment. Of course, the intentions are good, and that's all that matters. Right? Only fools would allow this quasi-science political engineering. Researchers also gave a troubling warning for countries around the world implementing lockdown measures. In order to be effective, they would need to last 12 to 18 months. The dark economic night is coming with you all as fully trained slaves in fear.